Thank you, Joe. I took piano lessons, not piano lessons, I took those too, but I took guitar lessons, I guess for 3 years, and I could only get one key. And my fingers weren't long enough, and the guitar was too big, and so I gave up on it. But I did take them a long time, and I always greatly admire somebody who can play any instrument, especially the guitar. So thank you. Yeah. So today, I was asked to shorten my message, so I'm going to leave the joke out. That's not true. That's not true. That was the joke. But anyway, The Eye of the Storm is a book written by Gary Simmons. And the first time I heard about The Eye of the Storm was when I was in El Paso, Texas, and I went to my first conference, and Gary was leading the conference. And what he was doing, he was putting things together so that he was in the process of actually writing the book, The Eye of the Storm. And it's a great book, and I remember the statement that he made, there is no thing or no one against you. And I tried to remember that and try to remember that on a pretty regular basis, but sometimes I forget, and when I do, I come back to that idea, there's no one or no thing against me. The question I have this morning is, what if everything in your life, every judgment, every failure, every obstacle, every conflict, illness, and loss was really about exposing your capacity to make the difference, to be the difference, to grow, and to find yourself? And what if you really knew the difference between you and your experiences, that you are not your experiences? You are not your experiences. You are what you believe. We see and experience our experiences in the human condition. But I can see through those because I can believe not in what I see, but see what I believe. And as I do that and move forward, what happens is I'm able to look at this idea of being the eye of the storm. I was flying into Richmond, Virginia, when I lived in El Paso, to speak at a church. And I gave a talk in the eye of the storm. And it was so cool because what happened was we were flying in the storm. Okay? And then all of a sudden, everything stopped bouncing around. Everything became very smooth, and we made our landing. And the captain came on and said, we just came in on the eye of the storm. And it's so true that we can choose either to land safely or we can choose to bounce around and be in the storm itself. And so this morning, what I want to do is talk about why we get into the eye of the storm and then how to get out of it, or get into the storm and how to get into the eye of the storm. And so as you see here in the eye of the storm, next slide please, we find ourselves, there are 4 winds of conflict. One of the winds of conflict is actually finding ourselves in separation. You know, when we were little children, I'm talking about 2 to 3 years old, we learned how to separate. We actually learned it because of some of the fears maybe our parents had, or maybe the way we were treated. And we found out that disconnection was more comfortable than connection. And so we continue to practice that and be in that mode, whereas the truth is that connection is more important than separation. And when we feel separation, we not only feel separation from ourselves, we feel separation from others, but we can't have the capacity when we really get into anxiety, and I know that's what we're dealing with today. That's why I'm talking about this in this world that we're living in. And when we find out that by being separate, we can not only be more comfortable, but we can protect ourselves. When the truth is we get separated not only, as I said, from ourselves, but we get separated from God, or what we think is God. We get separated from the idea of communion. We get separated from the idea that we have and can make a difference, because we feel so alone sometimes when we get in that circumstance. And so the next idea is in a conflict of winds, is that number two, there we go, is misperception. Misperception. What is misperception, okay? Misperception basically is the idea that what I am seeing is the truth. The idea that what I am feeling is the truth. The idea that what that person is doing against me is the truth. That's misperception. And it's that misperception where we create boundaries, where we create ideas about ourselves and others that are not healthy, because we want to protect ourselves. When Gary Simmons was doing his seminar, I was at that time running, and I would put in 4 or 5 miles a day. And so what happened was I went running on this path and went by this house, and this dog comes out. And the dog was fairly good size, and the dog was not happy that I was running across the front of his yard. And so I stopped and looked at the dog, and I said, "No one and no thing is against me." The dog did not understand that. So I gingerly walked away from his growl and started to run again. Every day for 4 days, the dog would greet me. He never changed his mind. I was always a threat as far as he was concerned. And you know, that's what we can do. We can think that a situation, a person, an idea is a threat. And when we think that and become that, we try to change them sometimes. But what we have to do is change our attitude so we're comfortable even though that person thinks that we are a threat or that we are threatening them. And so what happens is this misperception is something that we get into a habit of, and then we start to really believe with all our hearts that what's happening to me is caused by somebody else. When we're young, in that 2 to 3 year old stage, we think that what's happening and causing me to separate is my fault because I don't have the ability to reason. As I get older, I can really fool myself really well, and then I can think it's their fault that I feel the way I am. But I'm still separated. I'm still in that sense of separation, and I'm still misperceiving what's happening. Now, the next thing that comes along in this idea of the 4 winds of conflict is the sense of competition. Now, I don't happen to think, because I was born and raised probably an American, I don't think there's anything wrong with competition, healthy competition. I think it actually creates more flexibility, creates more creativity, or develops more creativity in an individual. But competition, if it becomes habitual, and it becomes strong, and it becomes all that you're about, becomes narcissistic. And as that happens, then what happens is you think you are right, that you are the best because you win more often than others. And the whole idea of life is, how much can I win? How much can I be in the right? How many times can I put somebody else down? And then as it grows in the negative way, you get into manipulation, you get into control, and you get into a sense of unhealthy hatred. The only word I know to use. You really dislike the other person. You may even hate the other person because they might show up in a different way than you're showing up and may be stronger and may actually be winning, and you don't like that. So you start to manipulate in order to get your way. And so that's another win, or one of the winds of conflict. And the last wind of conflict is the one of defensiveness, it's called. And so defensiveness, if we can have that slide, defensiveness is, and I could talk 2 hours on this because I am really good at it. I don't show it a lot anymore, but I am defensive. Now, I can say by nature, and that's just a, way of not admitting that I can do something about it if I'm not careful. And for a long time, I didn't know I was defensive. I didn't know how to define it. I didn't have the education, the ability, or even the understanding myself well enough to define it. But today, when I become defensive, I know that I'm defensive because a number of things happen. Number one, I get really, really serious with the people or the person I'm talking to, okay? Number two, my face changes color. Now, I know that because people have told me that, okay? Number three is I get tense. I'm not in a relaxed mode. I'm not in a meditative mode. I am tense. Why? Because I want to prove that what I am saying is right and everybody should listen to me. It may not be right, but as far as I'm concerned, it is. And so I want to defend my position, my place, whatever it is that I'm defending, so that I can feel more complete about myself, which is a falsehood. It doesn't work that way. And what I did over many years is learn to how to set the intention of knowing when I'm being defensive, recognize the signs, and stop it. And you can do it that simply. But I still, from time to time, if I get into a heated debate, will come across as defensive. And that's not helpful. It's not healthy. And so the conflict, one of the winds of conflict is this idea that we are defensive. We all have some of it in us because of our society, but we have the ability to control it. We have the ability to really understand what's happening inside of us so that that conflict that it's creating doesn't exist anymore when I'm open and when I'm free and when I can listen to somebody else. When we're defensive, we don't listen to anybody except our own voice. But when I really let go of whatever I think I'm defending, and you know I usually don't even know what it is, that I am able to hear, listen, compromise, and work together for the good of all. I think that's a way of showing up in the Christ consciousness. I think that that's a way of showing up knowing that what I believe or who I believe or what I am or who I am may be true or false, and that I need to work on that to really be divine expression in life itself. So I encourage all of us to look at that. And you know, in today's world, this thing about, and the reason I'm talking about this is because of the anxiety I feel everywhere I go. And we have a lot of that we can say can be anxious about. But the more anxious we become, the less we become, the less ability we have to straighten out and become a part of the solution. Because we want to separate from it, we want to hide from it. There is a statement in Gary's book, embrace tiger, return to the mountain. In order to be in the mountain, and metaphysically, in the writings in Chinese, the Qi, it talks about harmony, oneness, and wholeness. That's what the mountain represents. Harmony, oneness, and wholeness. And what does the tiger represent? It represents the things that get in the way of that as you're in the path, walking along towards the mountains. And there are tigers in our lives, and we see them today. Some are very evident. Some are not as evident. Inflation can be a tiger in our life if we let it be. Or we can think it out and figure out how can I deal with this by not allowing it to be a tiger, but to embrace it. We know that war, especially in the Ukraine and with Russia, that's a big challenge for all of us because a basic fear is we don't want to be involved in that. We don't want that to explode. We certainly don't want any nuclear devices going off. And so we get uptight about that or we worry about it. And really, except through prayer, I can't do much about it, and except through my attitude can I do much about it. But I can allow it not to have or be in charge of who I am and what I'm doing. And we can go on and on. I can list a dozen things. But you got the point, I think, that we are anxious right now, and there's an anxious society out there, and it's showing up politically like never before. And so I will say this, Tuesday is election day, please vote. Don't ask me how you should vote. I'm not going to tell you that. I have an opinion, but I'm not going to tell you. And so please vote, though, no matter what your philosophy is. So if I learn to deal with the tigers in my life, as I allow myself to be in the path of the tiger, the way that I deal with it is by embracing the tiger. You don't run from a tiger. That will create a desire for that tiger to eat you alive, right? So they say stand still That's really hard to do. I was told as a Boy Scout, you stand still when you see a snake coming by. Well, I was on a path and I saw a snake. I forgot all my Boy Scout training. I ran like crazy. And it was probably a garter snake, but it scared the heck out of me, okay? I wasn't expecting it. So we need to embrace what's happening in our lives and live with it. So as we start to look at this idea, we come to the next thing, which are 4 ways in which we can manage our lives. Go to the next slide, please. And these 4 is the be and the eye of the storm. The other part are all the storm. But all storms have an eye. I'm old enough to remember Hurricane Helen in 1958. It came right up my street. But I went out in the eye of the storm. I thought it was over. My dad said, you better get back in here. This hurricane is just getting ready to get rougher. And I remember that because I was going to go do my paper route. And that would not have been a good idea or a safe idea. So the eye of the storm can fool us, but at the same time, we have an opportunity to be at peace and harmony and enjoy, even when things around us are stormy. And so the first is communion. And communion is meditation. Communion is prayer. Communion is coming together with a group of like-minded people. Communion is the idea that I can come together in my oneness and experience what I call God. Experience thy life as I'm living and allowing Spirit within me to guide me and direct me. That's communion. And if you're not practicing some form of prayer daily, you're missing a great opportunity to take yourself out of the eye of the storm. Out of the storm. And so we have communion. The second we have is see it right. I always see it right. How about you? Yeah, Yeah, okay, let's be honest with each other. But what I see may not be right. I just think it is. So what I have to do, again, to see something right, I have to look at principle. Now, unity is a truth movement. And unity has 2 ideas of truth. One, that unity is truth-based. And what that centers around is that we are guided by the divine, that we are divine. And as divine people, we have divine ideas. And divine ideas, we have divine expressions. And we keep those in alignment, and we stay in alignment with the laws of the universe. What happens is that we really live life fully with love. And the second truth in unity is that it's faith-based, and that's based on love. Our faith is based on love. That love is the strongest power in the universe, and I believe it is. It can solve anything as long as I'm not using it to manipulate anybody, as long as I'm not making it conditional. It has to be unconditional love. And the way we can be in unconditional love is when we see each other, we look through our stuff. We look through their stuff, and we connect one-to-one in communion together in our relationship so that we know who that person really is. And we understand that that person is not their experiences or even the way they might be showing up today. They are divine. They are the Christ. They are the principle of God, and it is within them and each and every person. And so we have these principles, or see it right. Then there's purpose. And what is purpose? Well, we're talking about that this afternoon at the workshop. We're trying to create purpose. You see, Unity of Madison has a mission and a vision, but it does not have, and it does have a purpose, but it doesn't have a written purpose. And the written purpose, if you look at that, guides the board, guides the congregation, guides the minister in the paths that they can use in order to create the mission and vision. So it's very important. It's kind of the blueprint of how to get things done. And so the purpose that we have in our lives, for me, it's one thing, although it gets complicated. It is literally being divine expression. That's what I'm to be. That's who I am. Does it always happen? No. Do I make mistakes? Yes. Do I create havoc sometimes? Yes. But I always know when I do that I've done that, and my job is to first forgive myself and then to say I'm sorry to the person or the people that I have created any issues with. And that comes from unconditional love, I believe. I don't see any of you as human beings. I understand that we're in a human condition, but I see each and every one of you as the eyes and the ears of God. God doesn't have eyes. God doesn't have ears. God's not an entity. God's not a superhuman. God is energy. God is expression. God is spirit. Always there, always present. And all I have to do is change my mind just a little bit, and I'm now in the presence of God. That's grace. And so we have this opportunity to be on purpose, to be intentional, to be present, and to listen actively to others, and to love others unconditionally. That's how we stay in the eye of the storm. And then there's non-resistance. And we talked about Buddha this week in our class on unity and world religions. And the Buddha really taught non-resistance more clearly than Jesus did, I think, personally. And yet at the same time, Jesus taught non-resistance. He said, love your enemies. Do good to those who harm you. That's non-resistance. The Buddha said, give up all desire. I'm still working on that one, and I'm not sure I agree with it totally. But I think give up desire of greed. Give up desire of wanting it all. Give up desire of being in the human condition and living as though that's the only thing there is. But instead, to step into an understanding that my misperceptions come from my resistance. And when I'm non-resistant, I am able to work more freely with an individual. I have a friend who is in unity, and what he does is when somebody has a different opinion that he thinks maybe it's not unity, okay, he goes to talk to him. But he never goes in saying that's not a unity thought. He goes in to find out, why do you believe what you believe? And he just has a discussion with them. And they become best friends because of that. Isn't that a wonderful way to understand others? And that's what he goes there trying to understand the person, not change the person. And so when we do that, what happens is that we are allowing non-resistance to be our way of life rather than resisting everything around us. Resistance comes from fear. Non-resistance comes from love. Resistance comes from, I am right and you are wrong. Non-resistance says, if we come together, we'll come up with an idea that's the right one. So as we look at this idea of being in the eye of the storm, we have a choice. We can be in the storm, or we can be in the eye of the storm. I can be in harmony. I can be at peace. I can be joyous. I can feel comfortable in my skin. Or I can be all uptight. My face gets red. I can be not understanding because I'm not listening. I have a choice. And the wonderful thing is, I have the capacity and you have the capacity to make the right choice. And it is by embracing everything around you and allowing it to come up, look it square in the eye, and say, I don't want to be that way. This has no power over me. This has no power over me. And then the last slide here says, okay, be the eye of the storm. Be centered, be at peace. centered in what you believe the divinity in you is. Centered in the idea that you can make a difference in a positive way. Centered, not being in anger, not being in fear. And what happens is you don't have to work at being peace when you do that. You are peace. So go and be the peace that you are. Thank you. Now at this time, we are going to prepare ourselves for meditation. And what I'd like for you to do is just relax into this moment. Literally see yourself in the eye of the storm. See yourself in harmony, in joy, in peace. And allow yourself to feel the love coming from your heart space. Feel it in your legs. Feel it in the way that you're sitting. Feel it in your heart. Feel it in your hands and your arms. Let the love just flow through you as you. Feel that love expanding and moving through your head and out into the universe and touching all around you. And then know in this moment that you are in the eye of the storm. You are the presence of the higher self. You are divine expression. Sitting here now, having an effect on every person in this room, having a positive effect on Madison, and literally in the world, because we are all attached. Heart to heart, soul to soul, spirit to spirit. So now just be centered, be at peace, be in the silence. And now feel the power of the silence. It's in you as you. It is you. For in communion you become whole. You sense your wholeness. In communion, you know that you truly are love. You sense that love. And as we come back to this time together, we do so knowing that we are one. And so it is. And so it is. After you, sir.